The aircraft taxiing past Gate 14 was a 737-800. Marcus Reed had flown that exact tail number for 6 years. He knew its maintenance history better than its current crew did. He had flown it until she took it from him. That was 14 months ago. Now he loaded bags. He did not complain. He simply showed up. Every day at 3:15, he picked up Sophie. She had her mother's eyes and her father's silence. Her mother had died 3 years ago. Since then, Marcus had never missed a pickup. Not once. Not for any reason. What no one knew was this: the incident that destroyed his career had not been his fault. And he had the data to prove it. Marcus Reed's alarm went off at 4:45 every morning. Not because his shift started at 6 o'clock. Because the 45 minutes before Sophie woke up were the only minutes in the day that belonged entirely to him. He used them the same way every time. Coffee. Logbook. The folder he kept at the back of the kitchen drawer that contained 43 pages of flight data, maintenance records, and a single internal email he had never been meant to see. He read it the way some people read scripture, not for new information, but to remember exactly what the truth looked like. The incident had occurred on a Tuesday morning, 18 months ago. Flight MR 204 Meridian Airways, departing from Chicago to Atlanta. Marcus had been the captain. 22 minutes after takeoff, the aircraft's left engine had experienced an anomalous pressure drop. Marcus had executed a textbook emergency protocol, reduced thrust, initiated diversion, landed at Louisville without a single passenger injury. Every procedure correct. Every call precise. Every second of the incident handled exactly as training demanded. The investigation had taken 3 weeks. The conclusion had taken 3 minutes to deliver. The investigation board had concluded that Captain Reed had delayed the emergency declaration by 40 seconds, and that this delay had increased passenger risk unnecessarily. 40 seconds. What the report had not included, because the data that would have shown it had been pulled from the maintenance server 3 days before the hearing, was that the pressure anomaly had begun 11 minutes before takeoff. That it had been flagged by ground crew. That the flag had been reviewed by a Meridian maintenance supervisor and cleared for departure anyway. The 40-second delay the board cited had been Marcus waiting for the system to confirm what he was already seeing with his own eyes. It was not hesitation. It was precision. But the data that would have shown that was gone. Diana Cross had become CEO of Meridian Airways 26 months ago. She had built her reputation on operational efficiency, cutting costs, streamlining turnaround times, delivering 2 consecutive profitable quarters in an industry that measured survival in months. She had also, in her second month as CEO, approved a maintenance schedule revision that reduced pre-departure inspection time by 30% on regional routes. Marcus had filed a formal safety concern about the revision 4 months before the incident. The concern had been reviewed, acknowledged, and filed under a category labeled Operational Adjustment Requests, pending. It was still pending. 14 months after the hearing, Marcus Reed loaded baggage at Gate 7 through 14, picked up Sophie at 3:15, made pasta or rice or whatever the week allowed, and read her aviation chapter books until she fell asleep mid-sentence with her toy airplane still in her hand. He had not spoken publicly about the incident. He had not filed a lawsuit. He had done something quieter and, in the long run, more precise. He had spent 14 months finding the person who had deleted the data. The deletion had not been clean. Server deletions at an airline's maintenance database are logged, not in the main system, but in a shadow archive that feeds automatically to a third-party compliance server required by federal aviation regulation. The shadow archive is not accessible through Meridian's internal network. It requires a separate federal access credential. Marcus had spent 4 months obtaining one. What he found in the shadow archive was a deletion event timestamped at 11:47 p.m., 3 days before his hearing. The user ID attached to the deletion was not a maintenance technician. It was not a supervisor. It was an executive-level credential registered to the office of the Chief Operations Officer, a man named Gerald Holt, who reported directly to Diana Cross. He did not go to a lawyer first. He went to a woman named Renata Osei. Renata was a former NTSB investigator who had left federal service 8 years ago and now consulted for aviation litigation firms on a case-by-case basis. Marcus had found her through a contact at his union. She had agreed to a single preliminary meeting, asked him 11 questions, and at the end of the meeting had looked at him with the specific expression of someone who has just been handed something they recognize. "You have the shadow archive record," she said. "Yes. And you have your original safety concern filing, the one that was never actioned." "Yes. And you've been sitting on this for how long?" 14 months. She was quiet for a moment. Why now? Marcus thought about Sophie at the kitchen table with her toy airplane, about the chapter book they had been reading, about the page she had stopped him on 3 nights ago, asking him to explain again, carefully, completely, why a plane that was broken should never be allowed to leave the ground. "Because she's old enough to understand the answer," he said. Renata spent 6 days reviewing the materials. On the 7th day, she called him at 7 o'clock in the morning while he was making Sophie's lunch. "The shadow archive record alone doesn't prove Diana Cross ordered the deletion," she said. "But it proves Holt did it. And given the timing and the content of what was deleted, it establishes a chain of liability that any competent aviation attorney would call actionable." "I don't want a settlement," Marcus said. "I know."
She paused.
"There's something else. The maintenance revision you flagged 4 months before the incident. The one that reduced pre-departure inspection time. I pulled the approval chain. Diana Cross signed it. But there's a second signature on the internal review memo. A board-level safety officer named Paul Whitfield." "I know Paul Whitfield," Marcus said. "He's currently serving as independent safety auditor for the FAA's Regional Compliance Review, which begins at Meridian in 11 days. Marcus set down the knife he had been using to cut Sophie's sandwich. "He doesn't know what he's about to walk into," Renata said. "He will," Marcus said, "before he gets there." That evening after Sophie fell asleep, Marcus sat at the kitchen table and assembled everything. The shadow archive deletion record, the original maintenance flag, the safety concern filing with its pending status timestamp, Renata's 6-page preliminary analysis, the maintenance revision approval chain with both signatures. He placed them in order in a new folder, clean, numbered, cross-referenced. Then he opened a draft email addressed to Paul Whitfield. He wrote 4 paragraphs. He attached all 5 documents. He read it twice. Then he added one more line at the end. "I am not writing to ask for anything. I am writing because you are about to conduct a safety audit at an airline whose maintenance culture was altered by an executive decision that has never been disclosed to the FAA, and I believe you deserve to know that before you begin. He hit send. He closed the laptop. He went and checked on Sophie. She was asleep on her side, toy airplane held loosely in one hand, face relaxed in the absolute trust of a child who believed her father had everything under control. He stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then he went to bed for the first time in 14 months without reading the folder first. Cinematic still, a tall woman in a slate gray power suit stands at a floor-to-ceiling window in a modern executive office, coffee cup in hand, looking down at an airport below. Aircraft are visible on the tarmac. Her posture is commanding. Her expression is the expression of someone who has not yet been told that today is different from yesterday. Cool morning light. 35mm film look. AR-16:9. Style RAW. V6. Diana Cross arrived at her office at 7:15 the morning the FAA compliance review began. Her calendar showed a full day, 2 board prep sessions, a quarterly operations review, a 4 p.m. press call about Meridian's new regional expansion. She had been briefed that the compliance review was routine. Standard regional cycle. Nothing flagged in the pre-audit disclosure. She poured her coffee. She opened the operations summary. She did not yet know that Paul Whitfield had spent the previous evening reading 5 documents that had fundamentally changed the questions he planned to ask. Marcus loaded bags at Gate 9 from 6 o'clock until 10:30. He ate his lunch in the ground crew break room. He answered a question a new colleague asked about tarmac protocol. He drank his coffee from the same thermos he used every day. At 11:47, his phone buzzed. A message from Renata. Whitfield has requested the maintenance revision approval chain directly from Meridian's compliance office. They have 2 hours to produce it. GH is aware. GH. Gerald Holt. Marcus read the message twice. Then he put his phone away and went back to work. Gerald Holt walked into Diana's office at 12:03 and closed the door. He told her what Whitfield had requested. He told her the 2-hour window. He told her that the approval chain, if produced as requested, would contain her signature on a revision that had never been disclosed to the FAA as a material operational change. Diana Cross did not speak for 11 seconds. Those who knew her understood that 11 seconds of silence was the equivalent of anyone else raising their voice. "Who sent him the documents?" she said. Holt hesitated. "We think it was Reed." Another silence. "Reed is a baggage handler," she said. "He was a captain," Holt said, "with 14 months and nothing else to do." At 1:15 p.m., Diana Cross walked out of her office and told her assistant to contact airport security and have Marcus Reed's access badge deactivated. "Unauthorized presence in a restricted maintenance zone," she said. She said it the way she said most things, efficiently, as a category decision, without entertaining the possibility of a version where she was wrong. She did not think about what it would look like. She thought about what it would stop. What it stopped was nothing. At 1:22 p.m., Renata Osei, who had anticipated exactly this response, transmitted the full document package directly to Paul Whitfield's federal compliance inbox, bypassing Meridian's systems entirely. The transmission included a cover letter noting that the company's CEO had, in the previous hour, moved to revoke the employment access of the individual who had provided the original materials. Whitfield read the cover letter at 1:31. He called his division supervisor at 1:33. Marcus Reed surrendered his access badge at 1:19 p.m. with the quiet composure of someone who had already moved past the moment they were currently in. He took the employee bus to the main terminal. He sat in the departures hall. He bought a coffee. He watched the departures board. And at 2:47 p.m., he got up and walked to Sophie's school because it was almost 3:15, and he had never once been late for that. Sophie came out of the school building at 3:17, found him immediately in the crowd the way she always did, and walked over with the specific, deliberate pace of a child who had news. "We learned about pressure today," she said. "What kind?" "Air pressure. In airplane wings." She held up her toy airplane. "The teacher said the air on top moves faster, and that makes lift." She looked at him. "You already knew that." "I did," he said. "Is that why planes can fly even when things go wrong?" He looked at her for a moment. "Sometimes," he said, "if the person flying knows what they're doing." She considered this. Then she took his hand, and they walked toward the bus stop. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He did not look at it. The FAA's formal inquiry notification arrived at Meridian's legal department at 5:44 p.m. It requested full access to maintenance records for the previous 30 months, specifically including all pre-departure inspection logs for regional routes and all internal communications related to the maintenance schedule revision approved 22 months ago. Diana Cross read the notification in her car in the executive parking structure because she had not trusted herself to read it in her office, where people could watch her face. The notification was 8 paragraphs long. She read it 3 times. On the third reading, she understood that this was no longer about Marcus Reed. That night, Marcus put Sophie to bed at 8:30. She asked him to read the chapter about emergency landings. He read it twice because she asked him to explain, after the first reading, why the captain was always the last person to leave the aircraft. "Because it's their plane," she said, answering her own question before he could. "That's right. Even when it's broken?" "Especially then." She thought about this. Then, "Daddy, is your plane broken?" He was quiet for a moment. "It was," he said. "I think someone's fixing it." After Sophie fell asleep, Marcus sat at the kitchen table. He did not open the folder. He looked at the wall for a while. He thought about the 43 pages he had been carrying for 14 months. He thought about the morning of the hearing, sitting on the wrong side of the table in a room where the decision had already been made, watching his career be described to him in terms that had nothing to do with what had actually happened. He thought about the form letter his union rep had sent him afterward, expressing regret, confirming the outcome, offering a contact for career transition services. He thought about Sophie at 3 years old, sitting on his lap in a waiting room while someone walked through double doors with news that could not be unsaid. He had never been the kind of person who needed to be vindicated. He was the kind of person who needed the planes to be safe. Those two things had, this time, turned out to be the same thing. His phone lit up at 11:23 p.m. A message from Renata. Whitfield has formally requested Diana Cross appear before the compliance panel tomorrow at 10 a.m. Holt's credential has been flagged. The deletion event is in the record. Marcus, it's moving, He read the message. He put the phone down. He sat for a moment longer. Then he got up, turned off the kitchen light, and went to bed. Diana Cross arrived at the Federal Compliance Building at 9:52. Her legal team had spent the previous 16 hours building a response around 3 arguments. The maintenance revision was within regulatory parameters. The deletion had not been ordered by executive management, and any materials provided by a dismissed employee with an active grievance should be understood in that context. These were the arguments of someone who had not yet read the shadow archive record carefully enough. Paul Whitfield had. The compliance panel lasted 3 hours and 40 minutes. Whitfield presented the shadow archive deletion record in the first 20 minutes. He noted the timestamp, the credential ID, the content of what had been deleted, and the timing relative to the disciplinary hearing. He then presented the original maintenance concern filing, submitted by Captain Marcus Reed, for months before the incident. He noted the filing date, the pending status that had never been resolved, and the revision approval that had been signed 7 days after the concern was filed. He asked Diana Cross if she had been aware of the filed concern at the time she signed the revision. She said she had not. He asked her whether her office had a process for reviewing pilot safety concerns before operational revisions were approved. She said it did. He asked whether that process had been followed in this instance. There was a long silence. Diana Cross was not a person who lied under oath. This was not, she would have said, because she lacked the nerve. It was because she was too precise a thinker to make a mistake she couldn't correct. She answered the question. She said that in this instance, she could not confirm the process had been followed. The panel chair made a note. The room was quiet. Whitfield moved to the next document. Marcus Reed was not in the hearing room. Renata had advised against it. You don't need to be there, she said. Everything you needed to say is in the documents. Let them speak. He had agreed. He had dropped Sophie at school. He had sat in the public waiting area of the federal building for 2 hours, not because he needed to be close, but because after 14 months of waiting in the right direction, he found he was not quite ready to wait somewhere else. At 1:44 p.m., Renata came through the glass doors. She sat down beside him, without speaking for a moment. Then she said, in the measured voice of someone who has learned not to overstate things, the panel has issued a formal finding of undisclosed material operational change. The deletion event is being referred to the DOT's Aviation Enforcement Division. Diana Cross has been placed on administrative leave, pending the outcome of the referral. Marcus was quiet. And the original incident finding, he said. Vacated. Pending full rear review with the restored maintenance data. He sat with this for a moment. The data's still there, he said. In the shadow archive. All of it. He stood up. He thanked Renata. He walked out of the building into an afternoon that looked exactly like every other afternoon. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment. He called his sister. She answered on the second ring, and he told her in 3 sentences, and she was quiet for a moment and then said his name the way only people who have been worried about you for a long time say it, and he said he was fine and he told her he had to go get Sophie. Diana Cross left the compliance building at 2:10 p.m. She had been CEO of Meridian Airways for 26 months. In that time, she had restructured the company's regional operations, improved on-time performance by 11%, and delivered 2 profitable quarters. She had also signed a revision that she could not confirm had gone through proper safety review. She had employed a COO whose credential was attached to a federal deletion event. She had terminated a captain whose findings had just been vacated by the same inquiry that had produced them. She did not make excuses to herself. She was too precise for that. Walking to her car, she thought about the maintenance concern that had been filed 4 months before the incident, sitting in a pending file she had never opened. She thought about how many other pending files she had never opened. She thought about the baggage handler who had spent 14 months proving that the truth was still there, waiting to be read. Meridian's board convened an emergency session at 6 p.m. The independent directors had been briefed by legal counsel at 4:30. The FAA referral was public by 5:15. 3 institutional investors had called board members directly by 5:45. The session lasted 50 minutes. Diana Cross's administrative leave was extended indefinitely. A search for interim leadership was authorized. At 8:30 p.m., the board's chair, a man named Arthur Voss, who had been in aviation governance for 30 years and had read every document in the package twice, called Paul Whitfield. He asked one question. Whitfield answered it. Voss called Renata Osei at 8:47. Renata called at 9:12 p.m. Sophie was already asleep. Marcus was washing up the dinner dishes. He dried his hands and answered. Arthur Voss called me, Renata said. The board wants to offer you the interim head of safety operations position while the full leadership review is conducted. Marcus did not respond immediately. It's not the captaincy, Renata said. It's bigger than that. It's the structure that decides whether captains get listened to. I know what it is, Marcus said. Do you want to think about it? He looked at the refrigerator. One of Sophie's drawings was taped to it. A plane, a stick figure beside it, and underneath in her careful letters, Daddy FLYS safe. No, he said. I don't need to think about it. He told Sophie at breakfast. He told her he had a new job, that it was at the same airport, that it meant making sure the planes were safe before they flew. She thought about this while eating her cereal. Like a doctor, she said. But for planes, something like that. Do you get to fly? Not yet, he said. But the people who do will know that someone checked. She looked at him for a moment with the measuring seriousness she applied to important things. Daddy, she said. Did you fix it? He looked at his daughter, her braids slightly crooked from sleep, her toy airplane beside her bowl, her brown eyes waiting with the particular patience of someone who already knows the answer and simply wants to hear you say it. Yes, sweetheart, he said. I think I fixed it. His first day in the new role began not with an announcement or a press statement, but with a walk through the maintenance bay at 6:30 in the morning. He stopped at every station. He spoke to every technician on shift. He asked questions that could only be asked by someone who had stood where they stood and understood what the pressure to say cleared felt like when the system was built to make saying anything else too costly. By 8 o'clock, he had submitted a formal request to review every pending safety concern filed in the previous 18 months. There were 41 of them. By 10 o'clock, he had established a direct reporting line from any maintenance technician to the safety operations desk, bypassing supervisors, bypassing scheduling, bypassing the pressure of the quarter. 18 months of pending, resolved with a single policy change. He signed the policy notice with one line beneath his name. No one at Meridian should ever have to choose between saying what they see and keeping their job. There are people who get fired and spend years trying to get back to where they were. Marcus Reed had never been trying to get back. He had been trying to get to the place where what happened to him could not happen to the next person who saw something wrong and tried to say so. That was not the story of a pilot who lost his wings and got them back. It was the story of what those wings were actually for. In the maintenance bay, the morning shift began. 41 safety concerns were opened and assigned for review. And on the tarmac outside, the first aircraft of the day moved toward the runway, checked, cleared, and carrying people who would never know how close they had come, or who had made sure they never had to find out.